Hello and welcome to another video, a bit more analysis. We're going to check out a game that I had at the weekend, and this is in the 4NCL Chess League where my lovely captain Fiona was playing on her back from her tour of Malaysia, and she's looking very tanned. And I got 2 out of 2 at the weekend. Our team got 2 out of 2, so pretty good start, pretty good stuff going on. And the game we're going to look at was, it was a very interesting game, and I'm going to explain how I came to the move that I played that really won the game. First of all, to give you a little glimpse at what happened, let's just jump forwards to move 11, and we'll come back to this a bit later on, explain the build-up, etc. Now, my opponent has just played h6, giving my knight a bit of a kick, and the key move here, and the move that really won me the game, and this was where I had to think, should I say the most out of the whole game, was knight into e6. Whoop-boom! Put that in your pipe and smoke it. That's what I said to my opponent at the time. I said, put that in your pipe and smoke it. And he wasn't very happy with that. No, of course I didn't say that. But we'll come back to this a bit later on. But first of all, I just want to give you a little bit of background on what happened and my opponent. Now, the last time I played Peter Sowray, who's a really lovely guy, was I think in 2011, and it was the most embarrassing moment of my chess life. And let me tell you, I've had a lot of embarrassing moments, so this was ranked up, up there. So let me just share with you what happened. Now, I was leading the tournament, and I got to the following position with the black pieces. And I'm clearly winning here. And I went king h7. I was getting a bit annoyed that my opponent didn't resign here. And I was like, oh, come on, just resign. You know, I've got some lunch to eat. I've got, got a dinner date in the evening. I want to get out of here. Just hurry up and resign. Good lesson to be learnt there. Don't count your chickens until they've hatched. I'm 2 pieces up. I'm a Grandmaster here. And this is probably the most embarrassing moment ever in my life. Now, Peter Sowray played rook b1, and I thought, oh, come on, man, this is like a 50-50 shot. You're threatening my rook. All I have to do is take your rook, resign, go and have some nice lunch, go and enjoy some sun. It's never sunny in England, but you know what I mean. And I played rook takes b1 immediately, and I'm a rook and 2 bishops up. Anyone who can count can see that clearly. But in this position, a crowd had started to gather around the board. And my opponent here suddenly played queen to g6, check. And he said to me, put that in your pipe, Simon, and smoke it. And the problem here was my face went from the colour of white, which it generally is, being a ginger, to the colour of a tomato, the colour of my beard. It went, and it started beaming bright red. I tried to hide myself because it dawned on me now, there's a bloody draw. Because if I take the queen, it's stalemate. What the hell? And wherever I move my king, he just keeps checking me and forces me to take the queen. And after queen to h7 check, I went king takes h7, stalemate. White hasn't got any moves. How embarrassing is that? So that was a little bit of history of the last time we met. So I wanted some revenge, for bloody hell's sake. So anyway, let's go back to the game from Sunday. And I was white, and I started with d4. Now, recently I've been playing Tigers Modern, and this is what my opponent played against me, the cheeky geezer. And he went g6. And Tiger Hillett Person, who must be the world's leading practitioner on this opening, recently came over to GingerGM HQ and filmed a DVD for us. And I'll show you a clip of Tiger in a second. And it was a very educational and great time, him there. I learnt a lot from his filming of the DVD. He's a very charismatic and brilliant teacher. And we're working on releasing that later on for GingerGM as a very good system for black. Now, I've actually scored, I think, 6 out of 6 with it, with the black pieces recently. So it's been working incredibly well for me. But he taught me some little hints. And the first thing he taught me was in the critical position. So here, after bishop g7, there's a number of setups that white can play. But the critical setup, according to him, and you always listen to the world's leading experts, there's a good little hint there, is the Austrian attack, the so-called Austrian attack with f4, where white gets these free space invaders coming at you, boom, 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 and these free pawns are incredibly strong. So this is the critical line. And another thing he did say, well, in actual fact, what I'm going to do here, in a second I'm going to let Tiger explain his thoughts about this position. Now, please bear with me. I don't want the bloody edit police on my case. When I edit my own YouTube videos, and my, I don't know, ELO rating at edit is about 800. I can't edit to save my life. I try it. I haven't got time to learn it. I'm learning as I go along. I've got too many other things to do. And one day I might learn. So the editing's going to be pretty crap, what you see now. Now, the DVD edit is done by a team of professionals. So it will be top standard without pictures of dogs in the background, as you'll see in a minute. So it's a totally different thing what you're going to see now to the final version. Let me make that clear. But I'm trying to learn a bit of editing. So I'm just going to let Tiger explain about this position from the black perspective. And I think it's very interesting to hear what he has to say. So I'm now going to just let him explain this position, because he's the world's leading expert, and this will help everyone. So over to you, my friend Tiger.
Like a standard setup, or the basic position of the modern, and here white plays f4. And this is a very critical line. For a long time I didn't consider it the most critical, but lately things have been developing in a direction where you really need to have some control of it. And I used to, in my book on the modern for quality chess, I recommended a6 here. And for the last 10 years, to and fro, I've been thinking maybe it's playable, maybe it's not, maybe it is, going back and forth like this. And lately I've come to the conclusion that the line that goes knight f3, b5, bishop d3, knight d7, and now a4. Already in the modern Tiger I recommended sort of this line for white, but at the moment I find it very, very hard to come up with a good defense against this. And the point is that after b4, knight e2, the fact that the knight on c3 has moved to e2, it makes it possible for white to pamper the center. So when you play c5, the main idea of the modern basically is that you want to get a Sicilian structure to exchange this c pawn for white's d pawn when we have a kind of a dragon position where but we don't have to do all the theory. But in this position, when I go c5, white plays c3, and it's almost impossible to break down the white center without giving white too much space. And so the dynamic possibilities that are like the basic, or the ground on which the modern rests, or its soundness, it's been compromised here. So I've been trying to mend this variation, and if the viewer wants to have a shot at it themselves, I completely understand that. But for the moment I've given up on it, so I will not recommend. I haven't played it for the last year, and I'm a bit scared of this line basically, because white gets very easy play, and black doesn't get that kind of dynamic.
Well, there we have it from the Tiger's mouth. And you know, I think this DVD, honestly, I'm a bit biased because we're going to be selling it, of course, but I think it's going to be one of our best DVDs. If you want to learn this opening, or if you want to understand it from the white perspective, it's a new kind of DVD, because we're having me and Tiger doing it kind of together. He's taken the lead, but I'm throwing questions at him. So it's going to be really good DVD. But there we go. Tiger explaining why the move a6 is not the best move nowadays. And of course I followed his advice here. So as white, after learning what he was saying during this filming of the DVD, I played precisely his suggestion. So I played, of course, a4, and now I played knight e2, and this allows me in a lot of positions just to play c3, and this secures this very strong fortress pawn structure I have in the center of the board. Cheers, Tiger. It's quite funny, actually. Tiger, I think middle name is Christopher Robbins. And his mum, of course, called him Tiger when he was a youngster in Sweden. And that was really, he was telling me, a novel thing. Because to get a unique name in Sweden at that time, you had to have permission from the priest. And it was very rare to get permission. But Tiger was one of the only people who was able to get such permission. And it was obviously from, I think, Tigger out of Winnie the Pooh, I guess. I hope I got that right. And what a brilliant bloody name. I wish I could be called, I don't know, what would I call Eeyore Williams? Not quite my personality, but you get what I mean. So now let's have a look at the game, because I think there were some very good points here. And we can certainly, I can certainly explain to you what I was thinking to get me. I won in only 23 moves, so let me try to explain what was going on through my mind. My opponent played a5, and I just wanted to play natural good moves. As Tiger said to me, White hasn't done anything bad, so no reason to do anything strange here. Just play normal moves. So castling. What can be more natural than castling? And one of the main ideas White has in these types of positions is f5. To try to start an attack along the f-file. So this is, my rook is clearly going to help that attack, backing up the f-pawn, striking down towards my opponent's king. And now my opponent played a mistake. Tiger says in his first book that bishop a6 is the only way for black to play this position. But I do honestly believe that white has a very nice advantage here. Maybe even an idea with f5 immediately would be something I would be very tempted to play to start some kind of attack here. And I don't like black's position at all. The king is here in e8. It's not castled. There's going to be a couple of nukes coming towards that king, and I don't envy this king position. You've got Donald Trump here with the white pieces flicking out some nukes at the king. No one wants to be in that position. Let's hope that doesn't come true, by the way. So my opponent played a worse move, though. He played knight to f6. A very natural move. He wants to castle. And again, my thinking here was, well, I've got a nice position, but maybe I should try to punish my opponent for wasting these moves on the queen side, because he's played a6, b5, a5, b4. That's taken with 4 moves. And really, these pawns that he's put on the queen side have not done a great deal at the moment. Yes, he's gained some space, but that doesn't worry me too much. They're not really doing anything, these pawns. On the other hand, I have this big centre, and I thought, let's use the centre. So a natural move now, pawn to e5. Pushing his knight into d5. And now this pawn here gives me a great basis for an attack. It was Alakai, an ex-world champion, who said, when you have a pawn on e5, you should base an attack around that pawn if you can stabilise the pawn there. It's another thing that Nimzowitsch, the great German player, also wrote about in his teachings. In actual fact here, I think I may have played a slight error. If I had this position again, I would play f5. And I'd just try to steamroll my opponent off the board with the help of Eddie and Freddie, the e-pawn and the f-pawn. And the tactical justification of this is, well, I'm probably going to go e6, given a chance. And if my opponent tries to grab the pawn on e5, excuse me, let me just go back there, with knight takes e5, then he runs into a very annoying bishop to b5 check. And I saw this possibility in the game, and with the bishop coming into c6, already I'm winning the game here with a massive material gain. So in the future, if you do ever get this yourselves, I would recommend you play f5. Just try to use your pawns to create chaos. I tried a different route. I went knight to g5, and I thought this was a very interesting possibility. It's a typical idea in these type of positions, because if black is not paying attention and does something like castles, then I can gain a winning position with e6. And my knight defends this pawn and attacks f7 at the same time. So this is my idea behind this maneuver. And after e6, well, it should be quite easy to see that I'm already winning here. Because if my opponent takes on e6, well, that is absolutely diabolical for him. I'm going to win the exchange minimum. And if my opponent moves the knight, well, his kingside starts to crack with this Eddie the Eagle. Great film that was, by the way. I do recommend you watch Eddie the Eagle film. Has become a notorious assassin there on f7, attacking my opponent's king. So this is a very good position as well. So he can't castle. So this is very useful. My opponent here now played a key mistake. One of the issues that black has in this cramped position, one little error from black and he will lose the game. And that's precisely what happens after this knight g5 move. Now the move that black had to play in order to stop e6 is, of course, e6 himself. And here I have a couple of possibilities. Now the move I really wanted to play, which I thought was very thematic for this position of trying to destroy black, I've gone e5, I've gone knight g5, two very active forwards moves. If I want to continue playing with such energy, which is my style, then I should be looking at ways to open up the position, even if it means a sacrifice. And I wanted to play the move f5 here. But I don't necessarily think this is the best move. But would I have been able to refrain from playing this? I'm not so sure. And the idea of this, well, my opponent now has two ways to capture on f5. If he takes with the g pawn, I wanted to continue with the slow but quite dangerous knight to g3. This allows my queen into h5. This allows potentially a knight to h5. It allows a sacrifice on f5. And it looked very dangerous, this position for black. I mean, I looked at some lines with, let's say, h6. And now, again, in my style, I don't go backwards. I want to go forwards because I have very good coordination between my pieces here. And my opponent's king is in the middle. It's natural to think aggressively here. And something like knight takes e6, queen to h5 check, and even a second sacrifice on f5 look very tempting to me in this type of position. But I am taking a great deal of risk to do this because I'm going to be two pieces down. So, I'm not sure if this is entirely sound, but it's certainly something I would have to refrain from doing in the situation. I don't know if I'd been able to do that. I'm a bit too hot-headed to cool myself down. And, I'm a bit like, come on, let's throw some wood in the fire, keep the attack going. And I think I would have to have gone for this, just artistically. And the other line after f5 is if e takes f5, I thought I'd get very good compensation here. Again, maybe I can play knight g3 and play this slowly. But e6 and eventually me taking on g7 I thought would give me great compensation. I looked at the line here, knight to f4, with quite a crafty idea in mind. After knight takes knight, I now take on g7. And I can flick in a check here, so my opponent can't castle. And after some king move, bishop takes f4, my opponent can take a second pawn, but bishop e3. I thought this must be fantastic compensation. I thought my bishop would be so strong. Ideas of it coming to g5, and I thought this would be a great attack. So again, these lines look very tempting to me. I think, in the cold light of day, if my opponent had played e6, I can also swap to another plan of simply going c4. And my opponent has to try and keep his knight on this square here. If he moves his knight, he's getting horribly kicked away. So I think here the critical line, and this is probably the best way to play the position, would be pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, and now something like castles. But again, this position must be fantastic for white. And this is the kind of thing that Tiger was talking about. Because black has not been able to swap his c-pawn for my d-pawn. Remember, this was a key thing he mentioned. Therefore, my centre is very solid. And I always have ideas of c4 at some point. And also I can transfer my queen over to the king side in typical classical Dutch style to start an attack there. It looks very good, this position to me. But my opponent didn't do this. He had to do this. And after knight g5, he waved a red rag to a Williams. And you should never wave a red rag to a Williams, because the Williams will take that red rag and stick it up your bottom. And he went h6. I was very happy to see this move. Now, the next idea here shows you how if you look at games and you memorize certain patterns, you can use those patterns in your own game. So what I mean is chess is about learning. It's all about patterns. And here, the next move reminded me so much of a famous match between Deep Blue, the computer, and Garry Kasparov. The first time a computer ever defeated a human, a top-level human, should I say. And this was the change of power between humans and computers. Computers, after this match, were proven to be better at chess than humans. So it was actually a switch in artificial intelligence as well. And maybe even the future of mankind, you could even say. Now, before I show you the move, which I've already shown you at the start, knight to e6, let me just show you where I got this idea from. Now, in the Deep Blue match, this was Garry Kasparov had the black pieces. This match, okay, I'm just going to go through the moves very quickly, was a Caro-Kann. Kasparov, remember, was black. And Kasparov played the horrendous move here, h6, which is a very big blunder. And in this position, Deep Blue played knight takes e6. And this is a very similar concept to what I played. And it just shows you, if you know certain patterns, you start to learn more tactics in your own chess, you'll be able to hopefully use those tactics in your own games. You'll improve your memory nodes, and you'll be able to improve your own chess ideas. And the whole point of this is, well, after Kasparov played queen e7, castles, pawn takes, so it's a piece sacrifice, white had this check on g6. And now, after something like bishop to f4, which was played, black was helpless. Even though black is a piece up, this is what I call a strangulation tactic, because black has so little moves he can play. He can't use his pieces. Look at the black pieces. Just look at the black pieces. Can you find any good moves for these black pieces? They can't move. They're suffocating. So rather than a sacrifice to create your own initiative, which white does have here, the important factor behind this sacrifice, and this is such an important concept and something you can all use to improve your own standard of play, is having a very good understanding of your opponent's possibilities. So many players forget about their opponent's possibilities. They only concentrate on their own possibilities. But if you are able to realise that your opponent doesn't have many options, this will help your understanding of chess greatly. For example, here, Garry played b5, a4, and this is more of a positional long-term sacrifice. And it became clear after moves like rook e1 that black just hasn't got any way out of this bind, and he lost horribly. Now, remembering this idea of this sacrifice, I went knight to e6. Now, I should say that knight takes f7 was something I also calculated. But the problem with this, if we compare it to the game, let me just show you some potential lines here. After king takes, let's say, f5, a natural follow-up to try to get my rook in the game. Pawn takes e5, let's say I take on g6, king g8. The difference between this position and the position reached in the game is that my opponent's pieces have so much freer activity here. My opponent has the f6 square. He can move a knight there. His bishop might be able to come out. His pieces are free. And the way I played it, okay, this wins more material, but the way I played it with knight to e6 keeps his pieces contained. They can't escape. They can't breathe. So it's really a suffocation tactic, this. And it's understanding that black has no good possibilities to get out of the forecoming trouble. So let's have a look. He took on e6. Of course, this is forced. Now I took on g6 check. King f8. Time to evaluate this position in some respects. Now, what I was thinking is, what can black move? I wasn't even thinking about my own ideas. I was using the suffocation idea. And you can even do this in very tactical games. So let's have a look. Well, he can't move his bishop on g7. I'm just going to highlight the pieces one at a time. His rook on h8 doesn't really have any good possibilities. His knight on d5 can't really move anywhere good. b6 is a useless square. His knight on e5 can't really move anywhere. Again, the same reason. b6 is useless. And my pawns, because I've kept my pawn on e5, it stops him using the f6 square because I get my piece back. Now his bishop on c8. Okay, it can potentially pop out to a6, but that could be very bad for him. His queen can't move, so he can't move anything here. And the kind of thing I had to be careful of before entering into this combination was, okay, my idea here wasn't to blast away of f5, which is probably a good move, but I'm keeping the suffocation. I didn't want to play f5 because I thought, well, maybe he will take on e5, he'll gain the f6 square for his pieces. I don't need to let him out of the prison. And instead, I just played knight to g3. I bring another piece towards his king. This allows my queen access to h5 or g4. This allows my knight access to h5. And it just improves my pieces. And again, I worked out that all the possible moves black has just don't help him. What possible moves does he have? Well, he has the move in the game. And the other move I considered was bishop a6. This seems like a way to try to get a piece in the game. But the problem with this is now e6 is not defended very well. And after queen g4, I can even allow him to take on f1. If he does take on f1, queen takes e6. And it's pretty much impossible for him to avoid queen to f7 checkmate here. He hasn't got a good response to this plan. So the only other option for my opponent was king g8. And it's clear now, again, we've got to think about our opponent's moves. And this is what I did before doing his sacrifice. What's his idea? His idea is to use the f8 square. He wants to play knight to f8, and if he gets his knight there, he'll have a fantastic defensive piece. So if I play lazily here with a move like queen to g4, my opponent suddenly gains the upper hand. He gets his knight to f8, and suddenly his bishop defends, his knight defends. And now if I keep playing without much thought with knight to h5, my opponent could swap on g6, go queen to f8, and after queen f7, I'm probably losing here. I'm losing the thread. You can see how he's freed his position. So what you've got to do after king to g8, I'm going to ask you this question now to try to get a bit of interactiveness with this lesson, is how do you stop? How do you stop him playing knight to f8? How are you going to move a piece, improve your position, and stop this idea? This is what I was thinking, so I'm trying to get you to think in a similar way to me. You know your opponent's one move is knight to f8. If you can stop that, you keep the suffocation coming. So how can you do that? Pause the video now if you need to. Well, queen to h5 is the move I played, and it's a great move. Because now if knight to f8 is played, I have bishop to f7 check, and the situation has changed quite drastically. He has to go king to h7, and now I can play f5, and my opponent's position simply crumbles. There's too many threats against his king. I can even go knight to e4, knight to g5 check, mate, at a certain moment. And again, if you look at this position here, my opponent is suffocated. He has nothing he can move here. So queen h5, if you found that move, incredibly well done. It stops him getting out of jail. What else can he play? He's absolutely helpless here to, ideas. I can now check and take on e6. I can now play f5 because my pieces have gained more momentum. And in the game, he decided to play rook h7, a desperate bid to try to get out of his bind. But now the rest is reasonably simple with careful play. I take on h7, I get some material back, and of course I continue the attack, f5. This aims to free my bishop up, free my rook up, and allow my knight access in. So clearly this is extremely good position for me. My opponent tried to defend with knight to f8 because there was a big threat here. Let's say he plays, I don't know, what can he play? Again, he's suffocating. There's one threat here, bishop takes h6. I mean, there's no moves him. It's the suffocation. And after knight to f8, well, now I had foreseen that queen to f7 is just a deadly move because he's suffocated. He can't move his queen anywhere decent. He can't move his bishops anywhere good. His knights have no good squares they can move to. And his rook is completely pointless here because it's not guarding his king. And I also create two very deadly threats here. Threat number 1, knight to h5, queen takes g7, checkmate. Threat number 2, after queen to f7, is bishop takes h6, which is a very pleasant to the eye combination. So he's helpless. He tried to move his knight back to d7, but now I let loose with bishop takes h6, bringing another piece into the attack, and his king is getting, it's really, his defensive wall around the structure is being just removed. And the point now is if king takes, well, there's two ways to checkmate, queen g6 or queen h5, both are checkmate in one move. So he has to guard his bishop. Queen to g8 was tried. Of course, I keep the queens on the board because his king is more exposed. And after check, I now take on e6, creating a threat, opening up my rook. His position is crumbling. And now he tried knight to f8, this defensive idea. There's a number of ways to win here, but when you've got a couple of possibilities to win, you should always try to pick the simplest option. If that means exchanging down to a simplified structure, go for that. Because here, well, taking on g7 check is clearly best. There was a couple of ways to win. I could have played queen to h5 check, but then after knight to h7, I'm still winning easily, but he can kind of hold on for a bit. For example, let me just show. I looked at the line check, knight to h7, obviously my rook comes in, queen to g8, and now he wants to take on e6, so I play a move like queen to h6. This should be completely winning, but there's more pieces on the board, and when there's more pieces on the board, there's more chances you can make mistakes. Very hard to make mistakes here, but simplifying is just a nice technical way. If you can get a winning position by swapping things off, then it's obviously easier to play. So in this position, again, let me ask you the question, and I'm going to ask you to pause the video in a second. What would you do to simplify but keep the pressure, keep it simple? And pause the video now. Well, the simple way of playing this is the way I played it. It's to sacrifice for a very short period of time with rook takes f8, but this does allow my other rook to come in the game, and here black is completely hopeless. My opponent resigned now, move 24. And the point of this idea, hopefully you saw, that if a move like queen to g7, I have a check, and my rook will either come to f7 or f8, one of these two squares, and I'm going to win my opponent's queen and win the game. Very simple, and hopefully you can see that. And what else can he play? If his queen moves anywhere, I have this combination, and the magic number of attacking pieces is 3. And I have 3 attacking pieces against a lone king. The other idea, which it took me a while to see, is that after knight to f4, I don't have to play queen g5. When after queen g7, I get a winning position, there's a bit of work to do. There's a simpler way to play, and that is queen to e4, attacking the rook. And after d5, I had foreseen I had rook takes f4. And this is a very nice, simple way to win, because he has to exchange my queen off. And now, well, this ending is extremely easy for me because I'm about 145 pawns up. And they're all going to become queens. So that's why my opponent resigned. So that was, obviously I was quite happy with that game, but it really just shows you, you know, how did this work? Well, the opening worked because of this DVD GingerGM's about to release in the future, which is going to be a great DVD from both sides. I mean, it's gave me lots of wins, this Tigers Modern, this opening with black. And also now it's gained me wins with the white pieces. So we'll try to release that at some point, and I'm sure it'll be a great DVD. Give you a great weapon to play with the black pieces. Again, the other moment in the game, how did I consider this knight e6 move? Well, I considered this knight e6 move because of my knowledge of similar sacrifices in similar positions. And again, that's from experience, from checking tactics, and then from realizing that this was a way to paralyze my opponent. It was a paralysis sacrifice. And just understanding that I could stop my opponent playing any active moves was the key ingredient to making this a successful attack. And that's kind of the one lesson I think, you know, you should take away yourselves. And that is, you know, Paradis's tactic. Always consider, even in tactical situations, your opponent's possibilities. If you can disable him, then you'll win the game. Well, I hope you liked that video. Yeah, I'll be back with more stuff very soon. I'm streaming on Wednesday with Fiona on the Pro Chess League. It's going to be great fun, and hopefully I'll get to do more streaming in future. But look, thanks very much for tuning in to that video. If you lasted all the duration, well done. Hope I'm not boring the hell out of you. If I am, well, you could have turned off earlier, couldn't you? It's not my fault, it's your fault. There is a stop button. Cheers, and please do like, please do subscribe. I'm trying to get more subscribers, you know, to keep me doing these videos. I need to build it up a bit more, you know, and the more subscribers I get, the more stuff I can pump out. So thank you very much. Cheers for now. Goodbye. Until next time.